Hello, everyone. See that we've got some folks rolling in. Pardon me. We welcome to today's webinar. What we're going to talk about today is understanding configurations. The one of the things that we've gotten in some of our polls is a little bit deeper understanding of some of the configurations and some other things that we have now made plans for future webinars. So continue to please keep helping us with your polling questions, helping us head towards what kind of content that you're after. So thank you very much. Today is going to be understanding configurations and configuring devices in Ray Studio 3. Our goal is not to go through every one of these tabs and talk about exactly how to configure each one of these things, but rather an understanding of them. And then we've already done a webinar or two on some of these things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But based on some of your feedback today and other things, and some things we've already begun to plan, we're going to take individuals of these and have webinars or create some documentation, video documentation for these. So keep that in mind and continue to help us. I appreciate it. A couple things just to kind of get us get everybody on the same page that we typically start with. You have a chat box. Make sure you have that open. And I see there's a lot of folks that are welcome each other. I love that part of this. Make sure you have that turned on, and then and also down at the bottom of that there's a little the to button where you're sending that to. It defaults to all panelists. So if you type something in there and you leave it as default, it will only come to myself and Robinson and the rest of our AIM staff that are panelists here with what we do. So make sure you change that to all panelists and attendees if that's what you're after, and so then everybody can see what all your chats. So that's good. The other one is make sure you open the Q&A box, the question and answer box. There's a button on your little bar, your Zoom bar across there. Open that up, and any questions that you want answered during this webinar that are pertinent to understanding configurations, make sure you type them in there, and then the guys that are working behind the scenes from Lake Elsinore and Roanoke from our AIM offices will take care of some of those questions, and other ones they'll direct towards Robinson and I, and we will answer them live. So keep that in mind. Questions and answers for this webinar put into the question and answer box. Chats. Chat around, have some fun, and we're looking at that a little bit as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is do a quick introduction of Robinson. Robinson is an AIM tech out of our. Let me see if I can get that to move ahead. There we go. An AIM tech out of our Roanoke office. Been around since 2017, and I've had the pleasure of being able to work with him at the track and even in the Roanoke office, and maybe a little lunch here and there where Robinson and I both like to partake in lunch, right, Robinson? He's our co-host today. This is his first one, so he's very interested in doing these kind of things. He's helped me do some other things with other webinars, but this is the first one of this series, so I know he's going to do fine. Robinson, tell us a little bit more about you and where you're from and how you got where you're at here.
Well, hey guys, Robinson out of our East Coast office. I also go by Robbie in my personal life, but Robinson keeps it straight here since there's a West Coast Robbie. Automotive enthusiast. I like to speed. That's my problem. I haven't been on the track before, but we do support these events. We work with you racers. This is something I handle in my daily duties here with AIM. So I'm very comfortable explaining some of what we're going to go over here. And a lot of the stuff might have specific questions generated towards your configuration. Feel free to hit those with the Q&A. Some might get answered live. Some might be rolled to, we ask you to email us.
Perfect. And as Robinson said, the question and answer box, what we've also got a little bit of feedback, and we've been doing this for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, is sometimes there's a lot of questions go through that we may or may not answer during the webinar, and even if we do, but people are trying to watch that and they end up missing some of what we're talking about because they think those questions and answers are only going to be there for the duration. What we do though is at the end of this, we get a report back, and we create that into a PDF document, and it takes a day or two to edit it and get it where it's set up and good enough for everybody to download. But then we put that in the description box of the YouTube video where this goes within an hour or so after we're done. So within a couple of days, the questions and answers, even the ones that are answered outside of Robinson and I talking about it, maybe they've been answered with a written reply, they get included into a downloadable document for you. So keep that in mind, and with that we'll start to move forward. The first slide here is that we're going to go right to live data. We're going to go right to RayStudio 3, and we're going to begin the process of looking at the actual tabs and the configurations and all of that. So we're going to do a lot of this just live, walking our way through and talking about different things. And so make sure you give us some feedback or some questions if you have them. But what I want to start with is one of the things we do here is we have some polls, and I want to start with a poll that we haven't done in a couple of weeks, and it's always interesting to us and make sure that we stay on target. Here's a poll that talks about what AIM devices do you own? What hardware do you own and use? Select all that apply. It's multiple choice. You can, if you have a couple of different pieces, that's great. The one thing that we only get 10 boxes here with in order for our polls, 10 choices. So we're a little bit limited on some of the stuff we can add. So we added an other there at the bottom, and SmartyCam or other. If you select SmartyCam or other, if it's a SmartyCam, just leave it at that. If you have other, if that's what's in your mind, plug in other, and then in the chat box, go ahead and put other equals, and then what other AIM device that you have. That helps us keep track of that. So continue to answer that. We'll leave that go for another. It's been up for coming up on 1 minute. We'll let that go for another 10 or 15 seconds. What we're going to talk about today is while we let that kind of finish up. So we're going to talk about RayStudio 3. Make sure you keep the updated version. This is the current 3.32.09. What we're going to talk about is configurations, and what Robinson's going to start with is how do we build one, right? How do we select an existing one? Do we build a new one? He's going to kind of start with that, and then move into the channel tabs itself, and we start to figure out configuration tabs. I'm sorry, and then figure out what each one of those does. So. Everybody seems it's slowed down a little bit. Looks like a good chunk of you have voted on that. So I'm going to end that polling and get it out of your way, and move that off to the side. And the other thing that I want to do is let me get that ready for the next one. And then I'm gonna share the mouse cursor with Robinson, and then we're gonna remember, you have to click that once, Robinson. Yep. And then, so what we're going to do is give him control. He's going to take over now, and we're just going to talk about a number of different things, and we'll stop and we'll talk about different things based on some questions if we see some, but pretty free flowing here. So Robinson, go ahead and take over.
Well, everyone, we're starting with the basic of we're centering around a 1.2 device. This is our most current hardware, it has the most features. A lot of the setup steps for a 1.2 still mirror the older items, like a 1.0 device. There are definitely some setup internal to some units that aren't going to be covered here, and we're always open for more specific questions to your device. This will be mostly centered around 1.2 full configuration, and this is a starting point for almost every user. Some users are lucky enough their dealer will send them a unit preset up, and they never even have to explore this until they need to change something, and they might be lost, or you might be getting a brand new unit, and this is the very first thing you're doing for yourself. And a couple things here shown will be kind of a shortcut for some analysis purposes, but overall this will be how you generate the power of your unit to start with and to get what you want out of it. So when you come to RayStudio 3 and you open it for the first time, you're going to see these icons across the top, and if you hover over them, they will tell you what the purpose of that button is. The gears is the configurations icon, and when you come there, you should see all open, all configurations, and if you're brand new to the unit, you're going to be starting new. These buttons here will clone, as like it says, it'll replicate your file you'd like. Import and export get confused with receive and transmit often. Import export is like a file attachment. Do you want someone to send you it to you in an email? That would be an export or an import feature. Receive and transmit are if you are connected live to the device. If you wanted to pull what is already programmed in the device out of it to your software, receive is what you want to do. If you make a change that you want to send to the unit, transmit is how you'll do that. So when you start a new configuration, this will be the first window you see, and it's asking you to select your compatible device, the one you're wanting to configure. Oftentimes, there's the difference between the MXS and the 1.2, and customers aren't certain. Easy Indicator is actually reviewing the rear inputs on the 1.2. There'll be a 5-pin video in on a 1.2 device, and that will be a clear designation of a 1.2. So keep that in mind when you're starting one. You want to start on the right foot. If you create one in the wrong unit, you'll be starting new. There's no way to go back and change that to a different unit. I've already started one here under the webinar here. This is our example. And when you first start one, this is your first view. Across the top, you have save, save as, close, and transmit. As every teacher will tell you, save and save often. If anything, power goes out, your battery dies, things like that, those changes need to be saved. Save as will change the name of your configuration and create a new one that has the same settings under a new name. And as you have close and you have transmit. Transmit will send these changes to the unit. Now you can make a save to your software and it would not be in your unit until you transmit. You can also transmit without ever saving. So you might keep that in mind. Usually you'll want to save and then transmit so you know you're working with the same file if you go and change it again. Simple enough here in the channels tab, which is what we start under. Each tab has a basic function label. Channels is a little more in depth here. You have some of these features relate back to your harness. So a 1.2 device logger will have a 37-pin primary harness. That's going to include some open leads for power, ground, ECU, CAN high, CAN low, K line. Then you also have your secondary auxiliary harness. When you put these two together, it gives you the total here of 8 channel functions. The primary harness will have 4 analog channels here, well, analog digital, and we'll explain that. Your secondary harness gives you the other 4 channels, and there are ways to add more channels without the secondary harness, but all of the harnessing programming is found here. And when you go to set up, when you connect a sensor, you'll need to set it up. Here at the top, you have RPM. This is our analog RPM. This is simply the physical RPM connection looking for a square wave signal. This is not your engine RPM from the ECU, which sometimes do get confused. But if you wanted to go set up a sensor, you're going to have your harness. It's going to have the label of the channel, channel 1, 2, 3, 4 on the primary. And to add a sensor, you would come into here and double click onto the channel you want to change, and it'll open up a channel settings box. This is where you're able to rename it, program the function, select your sensor, your sampling frequency, unit of measure, and also if you would wish to display decimals or not. Here I've already set up one under water temp. I went to the function, I found temperature, water temp. I went to our sensor, AIM PT100. That's your very common water oil temp sensor from us. And if you look in the drop-down menus of a sensor, once you've selected your function, you'll have the labeling. And from us, often it'll have a part number as shown here. And this part number, you can find documentation on our website relating back to it and how to configure it in Ray Studio 3 and Ray Studio 2. That's under the sensors product page, out to the side next to the sensors themselves. So if you ever get like a linear potentiometer or anything similar, you can go in there and it'll show you the steps on how to set it up best.
Robinson, we get a question sometimes. Go ahead and open that box up just real quickly. We get a question sometimes is what is the sampling frequency? It's pretty clear what it is. How often does it actually grab the data and put it into our data logger memory from the sensor? But we get the question, and maybe Robbie can throw up a link to a document that we have. There's a sampling frequency, and I've just went out and I've done some examples with just dug into some different people and some different experts in this field, and they've asked and looked at what do they suggest for different sampling rates. And so I put up a document to put together a quick document that just shows some different people that have suggested different data sampling rates. Robbie's linked it into the chat box for everybody there. So if you click on that, it'll download a PDF file, and that'll give you an idea for different types, for accelerometers versus speed sensors versus, temperatures and pressures and driver inputs and stuff. Might be a nice handy little document for some people just to get a start. It's really kind of a personalized thing. So I'm gonna jump out of that for a second, and I'd like to do a poll real quick. As Robinson has kind of started on the channels tab, let's start a new poll. And this poll is, we've got these tabs across the top, right? What are the top 3 tabs you'd like more information on as we're talking today? Go ahead, and it's multiple. We're not going to stop you at 3. Can't stop you at 3, but if there's something there that you really interests you, Robinson will probably put a little bit of extra time into those tabs. Again, limited only 10, so there's a couple tabs here that are not as part of this list, and shift lights and alarms is one of them, and math channels. The reason is that we're gonna do a whole webinar on the math channel tab. We'll look at it a little bit today, but don't worry about that. We're gonna add a bunch, and then the shift lights and alarms, and maybe Robbie can throw up the link to this as well. Matt Romanowski in a previous webinar did a pretty good lengthy discussion of shift light and alarm tab. So that's one that while Robinson will open it and take a look at it, you have some information on that. Robbie's linked it up there as well. Some of the stuff we just talked about in the channels tab, as far as setting up an actual channel, Matt did another webinar with us that went into going through all of those steps, and Robbie we'll put that link up there for a previous YouTube video on a lot of the stuff that we just talked about on the temperature. So I'm going to let that go for just it's been about a minute and a half. So I'm going to end that here in just a second. If you're still doing it, go ahead and continue to do it, and then we'll share the results. And Robinson and I will see these for the first time, and it'll help us determine where we spend a little bit of extra time as we're walking through here. So let me grab over here. Let's end the polling, and let's end the polling. Oh, there we go. And then let's share the results. Here's the results. You've got a couple of them that tied for first, and that's the channel tab. And so Robinson will spend a little bit of extra time here, and we'll talk a little bit more. Yeah, CAN expansion. He wants the CAN expansions, which is a tab that talks about the adding of an AIM specific CAN device. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then the next one is the ECU stream, it looks like, as far as how to connect to external ECUs. And then fairly close behind there is status variables, right? So there you go, Robinson. You got a little bit of direction on maybe where you might want to focus a little bit of extra time.
Absolutely.
And of course we're not going to go super deep into all of these, but some of them will go a little bit deeper, and then eventually we're gonna have some webinars and maybe a focus on specific tabs here, or certainly if not a live webinar like this, we'll go into an area where we build them and then go straight to our YouTube page with them. So keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing those results, and let me do this, and then we'll hand it back to Robinson. Go ahead and click once, and then kind of finish up a little bit in here, and then we'll move across.
Yeah, and so you have, if you see these differences here, check versus unchecked. That is if you're going to data log it or not. So if you're not using your channels 5, 6, 7, 8, you would want to simply just no longer log those. Easy enough. That way it cleans up your data when you go look at things. You don't have a dead channel. It's a little bit ease of use. Moving down, you have some internal things like the internal accelerometers, the gyroscopes, the GPS channels, even your luminosity, odometer, and altitude if you want to log those. Now, I do have a showcase a little bit of a difference here with your Evo 4S's or your Evo 5s. They can be, normally you have a dash logger, it's mounted in an upright orientation. You don't need to change what would be roll, pitch, or yaw. But the Evo systems sometimes don't even have a display, but they're often mounted in inconspicuous locations, maybe facing up, maybe facing out, turned sideways, things like that. So you do have the ability in these units to change over. You can simply go and change what is your orientation, and this will automatically change your channels to match that orientation.
Pretty cool little feature there.
Yeah, certainly. And some people might not know that. If you don't, there you go. Go in there, change it up. zero it out and start using it to more of your benefit. And from here, we'll hop over to the ECU stream. Simple enough. I already have one selected here. This one matches what I would have on my current car if I wanted to go and direct wire. Simple enough. We have documentation relating to your ECU and what our expectancies are if there is appropriate communication. And then you simple enough come in here, select an ECU from a drop-down menu. It's listed by manufacturer and model. I've selected one here so it ties in later to certain functions I'm setting up as we move down across these tabs. Next would be the CAN 2 stream. And this is commonly would be found, the CAN 2 connection would be found on the secondary harness or auxiliary 22 pin for a dash logger. We have some pre-programmed CAN devices here, things like tire temperature, tire pressure, ABS modules. So this documentation is the same as listed as under our ECU stuff. So you can go in there and see what we've programmed if you'd like to. And this would be just, preset units. You can add custom CAN in here, as you see noted. So if you built a custom CAN protocol, it might be found here, or it could be found in your ECU stream as well. So keep that in mind as you consider it. And the next tab down is CAN expansions. And so this is where it's kind of interesting. Commonly you have 3 CAN networks in your AIM logger. That is your ECU CAN, as we consider it commonly, your CAN 2, which is more for external CAN devices, and then you have your AIM CAN, that's the 3rd CAN. This one is reserved for our proprietary peripherals, and some of these do require a handshake, whereas other ones are automatic, so you don't need to set anything up. They'll just recognize and work. Things like the GPS is one of those things. But here you see the ones that are required, or might have required setup. So the LCU1 CAN and then the channel expansion are common ones that we are adding on for a lot of people. And when you do that, you have the ability to make a handshake if it's recognizing correctly. So you come in here, if you have one already existing, you need to add a new one, you would need to hit new expansion. But if you're opening it for the first time, it would come to this window and you can select. So I'm going to use the LCU1 as an example. Selected it and okay. Now it's asking, this information here is the setup. Do I want Lambda, AFR? Am I logging it? And these are diagnostic channels that'll tell you things like it's a probe, a problem, short circuit. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, status codes. If you do have a device connected and it's recognizing correctly, then you should be able to hit get expansion serial number, and it would recognize the live connection. It would allow you to enter the serial number by clicking on it. And then once you've transmitted this to your dash, you will have the handshake agreement and you'll be able to read that information correctly. The next tab over, we have math channels. I think Roger has some good examples. Here, it's simple enough. If you look, they're gonna have an explanation. A lot of people wanna know more examples of a math channel and how to go about using it to their benefit. Roger, can you give us some of those examples you might have?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is make sure that we have the basic understanding that these math channels here are what are being loaded onto your device, and they're going to be being performed in real time, right? So they, as opposed to what we've been talking about a lot in these webinars, which is math channels that are in Race Studio 2 analysis. So keep in mind that these are just some stuff that may be done in real time on your logger as you're out running around. Yeah, and we've got these 6 that are built for you, and bias is just literally just the bias between the 2 channels. A lot of people will use maybe front brake percentage. Maybe you have a front brake and a rear brake pressure sensor. And what you really want to know is, I want to see those pressure values maybe in the paddock area before we go out, or in real time. But another thing we might want to be able to do is just push on the pedal and see what our brake bias actually is if we have a bias adjuster. That's one of many things. It can take any 2 channels and then calculate between the 2. The other one that is that is even more, I'm gonna just double click and open it real quickly, but the other one is the bias with thresholds. And this one is, and brake pressure is a great example of this one, but it can be in any other channel as well. We're talking about, we take a couple of channels and let's say it's brake pressure front, brake pressure rear, and we're gonna push out a percentage value of brake bias, right? But what this one does compared to the one previous is it gives us this minimum threshold. And if and if you read down here below, it does this math, but and if both thresholds are exceeded, it gives you the actual number of the math, right? The 53% front brake pressure or whatever. If you plug in, say, 100 psi for both of your brake pressure sensors, both of them must be over 100, or else the result is 0. And what that does is when you're off the brake pedal and you're running down the straightaway and the brake pressures are sitting there floating at 0 to 3 to -3 psi, something like that. They bounce around a little bit. The percentages are going to be, that bias percent is going to be, going all over the place because it's doing math with little tiny numbers, and of course it's very literal. So once we put this in here, then it's only going to start doing that calculation for you. It's going to say 0 on your display until both of these brake pressure sensors are above X, or minimum threshold, which in my example here is 100. So once you add a little bit of pressure to your pedal and your brake pressure sensors, then all of a sudden this bias calculation starts to work. Pretty handy, and it takes a lot of the noise out of when you're not needing it. So that's kind of handy. Let me get rid of that one just because I don't want it there. And then and then we've got a calculated gear where we can basically just take our gear position versus our engine RPM versus our vehicle speed, and it does some math. It actually works fairly well, but we have another option where you can come in and you can actually plug in. I'll just open it up real quickly. The pre-calculated gear. This is where you actually go in and you plug in a bunch more information. You pick your RPM and your speed channel, and then you plug in your tire circumference, your axle ratios, and then the actual gear positions. If you had a 5-speed, you turn it down, and then you plug in the actual ratios of each gear. What this ends up doing is your pre-calculated gear becomes very very robust and works really well, and you can have that on your display while you're running. And then using that value, you can do some things that Matt talked about in the previous one, where you're doing some shift lights and you're basing it on, let's say you don't have a gear position, an actual sensor in your transmission. You can do this, and then you can do different shift lights for different gear ratio, gear positions and things like that, which is kind of handy. So a real powerful tool here on the mathematical channel settings. So let me cancel out of that one. Let me get rid of it now that I did it. And then the last couple are little correctors. The first one is one that you might have seen in the Race Studio 2 analysis channel. When you right click on a channel, you can either give it a scale or a shift to a value. Let's say a throttle position is coming in, and it's going from 0 to, but it tops out when you're flat to the floor on an ECU based throttle position. It's only showing like 85%, and you really want 100% because you're doing some math, downstream math with that, and you want it to show true actual values. You can come into here and you can click on that and add in a multiplier towards whatever it is. So it takes the 0% and multiplies it by 1.2, and it also takes the 85% when it multiplies it times 1.2 or 1.15, and so you end up getting a nice linear corrector. Or the offset side, the second piece of this is, let's say your steering is always at -20 degrees from something you can't calibrate very easily. Right here, you could always plug in a +20, and it will bring that channel of data and actually modify it and correct it in this linear way. And then you end up with a good value coming out of your data logger. It's being stored. Let me get rid of that one. And then the last one is we wanted to give you some sort of an ability to just do a simple operation. So what we've done, oops, there we go. You can take a channel versus another channel, a channel versus a constant. You can come in here and I'll just leave all this like it is, but you can come in here and select your water temperature, whatever, and you can add, subtract, multiply, or divide to that a certain constant of a certain value, or you can take a second channel and you can add or multiply, divide, and take that and add two things together. An example that I have used, some people wanted an average brake pressure from front to rear, and so I'll put brake pressure front here and brake pressure front rear here, and we'll add the two together, and you create an overall brake pressure. Some driver coaches even like that. They like to just put all that together and see exactly what you've done, and then build another one of these right behind it that takes that overall brake pressure and then divide it by 2, and you end up with an average brake pressure that way. So all sorts of little things that you can do with these math channels. That but the bigger point of this is understanding that this is going to be applied real time on the hardware device that you have, which you'll be able to show in the display itself. So a little bit deeper into the math channels than maybe what we might have thought, but it's I get a lot of questions on that, and just got a couple just even yesterday, so I wanted to go over it here. So thank you for that, Robinson.
No, thank you, Roger. And actually, I'm going to apologize, but I need to backtrack because this is something I really wanted to showcase under channels. We got a lot of questions about if you open up a channel, you have analog and digital, and I skipped this in my notes, but digital is a way that you can use maybe a button to trigger something if you'd like, and you have the ability to log it. So a lot of people ask, can I do a button push and log it somewhere? A digital channel will allow you to do that. You have monostable and bistable. Monostable, simple enough, on, off. Bistable would be on, press, off, press. So a lot of people are, interested in that, and digital channels are one way to do that. You also have the ability, maybe if it's like an oil pressure switch, which are often resistance based, you have the ability to add a pull up internal resistor, which could basically you could do a signal in, and that would show you, it'd be on off of the oil pressure switch at the same time. So digital channels do have some high benefits that a lot of people ask for. Now, it does take away a channel function, so keep that in mind. If it's something you want to use, you need an open channel. But moving back down to where we were under status variables, I have one set up here, and it's basically an example. It might not really be, something you use in real life, but brake pressure on. And what it's showing is that and you also have the ability to log it or not. So a status variable can be logged, whereas an alarm might or cannot be. So this is a way to tell yourself a flag in your data for something. So here I have a brake pressure greater than 800 PSI, which might be considered a heavy braking situation. I'm looking for it to be true when all of these are occurring. GPS speed is greater than 25 miles an hour, and ECU RPM greater than 750. So those would be kind of racing conditions for most people as considerations. And, this is a way that you can go back in analysis and see a quick flag. And there's a lot of math channels that you build in analysis that this might be a shortcut for.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of math channels in our data where we create this break on switch, right? For a lot of guys that are doing that. This is a way, if you want to have that break switch already done and have break on already done, this is creating that brake on switch, but also creating it only when you're out on the track going faster than 25 miles an hour and if the engine is running. So you end up with not a lot of false little brake on. So very handy. Status variables are a cool little tool.
It's something that's kind of only limited by your imagination, just like a math channel. And if you wanted to build one, you add a new variable and it asks you to name it, the frequency you'd like to sample. Do you want to log it or not? Is it true for any or all, as it sounds? If it's any, if you have multiple conditions, one of them has to be true. If it's all, then you have multiple conditions, they all have to be true. Otherwise, it's false. Next, you have an important one in tabs, parameters. And this has the banners across telling you what the functions might be related to. Lap detection is you see here at the top, hold lap time, and this is actually for your display. So how long are you seeing the lap time as you come across your start finish line? And a lot of people don't know that this can be changed or edited, but you could make it shorter or longer. And something you might see also that's important in Race Studio 3 configurations are these question marks. And these question marks sometimes open up a reference page of information, or sometimes they simply, give you a little blurb like this. This is the number of seconds. It tells you what it is doing itself. A little more of an explanation than just the label. Under lap detection, it's also how are you detecting your lap? GPS beacon or optical beacon. Optical beacons are not as popular as they once were. If you're indoor racing, something like that, I still see them used time to time. And you can still have an optical beacon and use GPS for tracking your driven line, things like that if you'd like to. Here you have the ability to change the track width. I think 33 feet is common for maybe karting tracks. Automotive, you might want to widen it. One thing to consider is if all you're doing is widening your GPS gateway threshold. So how large of area are we looking to cross to trigger a lap time. So if you're off-road racing, you might want to make that larger. If you're not going through a small checkpoint, something like that, or even on a road course, you might make that larger. Keep in mind, though, on certain courses, your start-finish line might be close to another side of the track, and you could trigger, if you make it wide enough, you might be on that part of the track and trigger. A lot of people will even set these up for wide enough to capture the pit lane. So you're going through the pits and you miss a lap because your gateway is not large enough. So this here could change that for you. Also under optical beacon, this is basically, you're looking for an infrared receiver, and then you're catching that light as you come across it, kind of like a garage door opener in thought. Commonly when we use them often, there would be multiple beacons out. So you might trigger lap time when you're on the other side of the course, maybe even. This is the way that you can ignore the signal for a certain set time. Next, you have reference speed, which is newer to software releases and firmware. This is going to relate to your odometer reference. So here you can go to, I have GPS speed. I could use my ECU speed, or since my ECU is giving me individual wheels, I could use those as well. Something to keep in mind as you're using your odometer, which measure would you like to be the official tally? Underneath start data recording, this is the big one for what you want to capture and when. So basically how do I start recording? Our standard condition is a wide one to capture hopefully everything you might want to record without missing something. I'm of the world, I'd rather have data I can ignore than miss something I would want to see later. And it tells you here what we have set up. RPM is greater than 850, or speed, not GPS. So this would be ECU, wheel speed, something similar, is greater than 6 miles per hour. Under custom conditions, this is where you can set up what you wish to specifically. You have any or all again, so multiple would have to be all are true. If any would be any that you set up are true. You're using one or the other here. And this is an example, GPS speed. So now I'm not using ECU speed, GPS speed is what I want to use. Or also maybe backup vehicle speed from the ECU. Any combination of things. One thing to consider is some people try and set it up as voltage. If you set up as voltage, you cannot get into your menus when you're recording. So kind of keep that in mind. You might be recording when you can't get to your menus. You might think your buttons aren't working. But voltage is something that, once you turn it on, it's going to start recording at a certain voltage. That can capture everything if you want it to. Next, we have shift lights and alarms, where we're just glancing over it. There's a full 1-hour seminar related to that. Robbie's linked it in the chat earlier. Maybe he can drop it again. If you've not seen it, definitely go watch it. It's very informational. One thing I wanted to touch on that I think might have been missed is this is where you would set up your digital outputs. Output is basically just a signal out. So maybe, at a certain temperature, you want to send a signal to turn your fan on. Those things can all happen there. And I know a popular one, I think, was trigger commands in our poll here, Roger. So as a trigger command, I've simply set up a rear view camera. So the rear view camera needs a condition for it to cut on for your screen. Gear indication is the largest I would think that most people are going to use. So here I've set one up. It asks you to name it. It asks you any and all. As you see, these can be imported, exported. If your friend has one you like, he can send it to you. I've done here, simple enough. It asks you to click on it. It asks you the source and the channel. I've selected my ECU. I've selected gear. I've okayed it. And then it asks you equal to or different from. So anytime I'm equal to reverse, and you can see here, it could be any gear I like, then it will trigger the following actions. And here are your actions they can set up. So you could do your next display page if you wanted to. So this is the way you can make a condition to change pages. Maybe a driver won't see an alarm as quick as they would see a whole page change. And that's something you can set up. You also have normally first camera and second camera inputs. You can have 2 rear view or mirror cameras if you'd like to set them up. You also have an ability for display buttons, push button 1, 2, 3, 4, and also as well as resetting your alarms with a trigger. And another thing we have down the line is icons manager. I've set one up here as well, just as an example. Similar to the other setups, it asks you to name it. It asks you what is going to happen, and then what else happens. So I've done a water temperature will be blue icon, and the icons tie into your display for the 1.2 devices specifically. The blue icon water temp I've set it up for. So anytime the water temp is less than 180 degrees, it'll be showing blue, or else if it's above that, it's going to be showing a yellow. So maybe like what I consider to be a engine warm temperature. And adding icon, you have the ability to select, and then we have predefined and free, which will, let's see if it's gonna, there we go. So free is something where you can select the colors you'd like. Predefined is as it sounds. They are already selected for you. You are set to these colors, but oftentimes you're just gonna be changing from something to another something. So maybe, you know, you have a black warning for when it's not important and red for when it's important. Free, you go pick your colors. I did these under free. I set up my own colors. And you can actually even import BMP file as if you wanted to create your own icon and to import that in.
Pretty powerful tool there with the icons that we've added recently with the 1.2 devices. A lot of people like that.
Certainly. And the icons tie in, like I said, to your display. Display is one of the requirements of a configuration. If you start a new one and you want to send it to a unit, you've had to have set up a display page. And to set up a display page, you'll simply add a new page. This will open you up to the options you have available to you. Now, some of these spaces are predefined. You can only be for gear. It can only be for RPM. But we've actually seen a lot more flexibility introduced recently. The icons are included. As you notice here, you have a tabs set icons. So if you wish to have pages with icons, this will let you set the icons as you notice them across the bottom. You also have then pages of set 1. So these are more familiar to you if you're in a 1.0 device. These are pages without icons across the bottom, and you can simply just click on one to select it. Once you've added it, it'll appear here on the right side like this one is. And to set the page as you wish to display what where, you can hover over it, and you'll notice it's linking to the bottom down here for what is where it is displayed. And for things like RPM, you have the ability to scale it. So if you'd be in a pretty cool car if you're going to 18,000 RPM, but most of us are probably down here somewhere around 8. So now you notice that it's scaled to a nicer display ability. I've set water temp here in the corner, and if you notice down below, it's linked. And if you wanted to change the font, colors, or anything along those lines, that is here on the right side of your screen, depending on your screen size, it might be down below, where you can change the colors and the fonts as you wish of the unit that you're displaying. So that's changed up here. Sorry, should have been under my water one. So you notice it's all white. I wish to change it. So this might help someone who has a maybe a slight issue with contrast. Maybe you see one color better than the other. Maybe you've tied this into your alarm to even change colors. It's something you can do if you wish to. Keep that in mind as you set up your pages. There's a lot of flexibility that we're seeing with the 1.2 devices that we just simply hadn't before. As you notice here, here's my set icon. If you click down here, you can still do basically what you've seen done in Icons Manager. I think Icons Manager is a place where you can see more at once and kind of give yourself a better grasp of what you're actually adding in. But simple enough, you can come in here and you can select what you've already set up, or you can just set up a new one as you wish to do. And cross to the next to last tab, you have SmartyCam Stream. You would just consider these to be the broadcast channels outward to your SmartyCam if you're adding one. Some of these will automatically be linked just from name recognition, such as ECU RPM, GPS speed. A good thing to do is just to start with enable all functions. As you can see, now I can set these functions to the channel I wish to source. Keep in mind when you're doing this, if you have maybe brake pressure, brake position, these often get backwards confused as to which one you're actually using, and you might go out and see that brake pressure didn't come across. Well, you've actually maybe linked it to brake position or something similar. So come check these if a channel wasn't working before for you. This is a good place to start. this part of it is step 1 for a SmartyCam. Step 2 would be the actual SmartyCam overlay configuration itself. And lastly, what I have on the tab is CAN output. This is very in-depth, and I'm just brushing on it, but this would be how you could do a CAN output. CAN 1 is commonly considered your ECU CAN on your primary harness, so that would feed back if you're connected to an ECU, or CAN 2 is on the secondary harness, and that would be something normally you're communicating with another external device of some sort. And that is my basic coverage of the configurations. Of course, there's a lot more in-depth stuff that you might have. Feel free to contact us, or maybe you have questions about the internal settings to some units like the Solo 2DL, the MX UTV, and so on. We might have a webinar to cover some of that. I know the Solo 2DL is a popular choice. I think Roger's going to have our closing statements here.
Yeah, the part about these tabs here, Robinson went through and focused even a little heavier on the ones that you gave us an idea on the polls, which was very handy. There's some of these that are going to be, I want to do one completely on math channels and give some good examples, and actually have something maybe hooked up and working. So give us some more feedback as you get a chance. The ability to do these webinars based on what you guys are after is very important to us. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Robinson. Those are great tips and tricks. Hopefully it helped everybody understand it a little bit better. The one thing, maybe Robinson, I see one question there that I know we've chatted about a little bit, and I know it's been a topic of conversation. Will there be a free form for the template itself? Giving the end user the ability to design and create their own page layouts. Is that something that's what are your thoughts on that?
So, as you know, we're just seeing the front edge of what what Italy has accomplished with the new hardware. That hardware is maybe a year-ish old. Some of these features are less than that old. So I think something like that might perhaps come along. I've heard from some people who've actually been with the teams in Italy that it's a bit more complicated than an end user usually can kind of seem to pull off. So I think the flexibility we see there is to keep the ease of use available, and perhaps maybe there will be an advanced display ability as we move forward.
Yeah, what I understand is that there's a lot of layering happening there, and exactly. We're gonna have to figure that programming out to make it where you don't add something, but yet it's on a bottom layer, so you don't see it. So if we're gonna make that happen, we'll have to work out some of those issues to make it where it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a popular request, and would be really cool to have happen. So
if you have something that you don't see, feel free to share with Robinson or you're gonna see our email addresses in a moment. Mock something up a little bit and give us an idea of what would be important to you. We'll no doubt share that with our Italian.
Yeah, feedback is always welcome, and it's one of those things that feedback, just like as we've done with our webinars, the more directional it gives us, the better. The customer base drives what we see. So we've added configurations here a little short notice, just because we've seen it as a high demand item. It's also the first thing you do when you start with our devices. So it definitely was something that needed to be covered, and I think will help a lot of people get started and get where they want to be with their unit before they ever even get into analysis. That for me is the advanced function of the unit. The analysis is where you get dizzy. Configuration should be pretty straightforward for you once you've done it once.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump back into our presentation material, and we just finished our live data part. There's a couple things that I want to go over here. These videos, as soon as we get them done, we send them up to our YouTube site right away. And there's a bunch of other videos there. Many of you have seen that. Please go out and take a look at some of those. We're really a training and support company. We're out there. We're getting out to more tracks, and as this situation is ending for most of us, we're able to get out to the tracks and do a little bit more. We look forward to seeing everybody out there. If you have a question, make sure you give us a call at the 800 number there, or email. Give us a holler. We're always here to help. You might even speak to Robinson.
And maybe some of you have already run into me at the track on the phone. The guys like myself, the technicians, we are the ones who answer your emails, answer your phone calls, and we see you at the track. So Feel free. I hate when I hear a customer call me, only out of frustration because they've spent time trying to do something that was a simple thing. Once you know where it's at, 5 minutes of our time is an hour of yours. So
Yeah, exactly.
don't be bashful. If you have a question, we like you to come forward with it, and we love to help you.
Of course, we have those YouTube sites as well. We try to, if we run into a question a lot, we try to put it out there as well, as fast as we can. So there's always that option as well. I'm gonna start one more poll as we get ready to kind of close this up. And what are your top 3 future webinar topics? The idea of where we go with these, I'm adjusting them weekly, certainly based on the information we're getting back, and then of course feedback from from the webinars themselves like this, plus emails and phone calls. I love it that you guys are helping us direct this. Pick your top 3 topics. We've data analysis ends up being a pretty popular topic for the most part, and so we do some configurations like this, and then we'll go do another 2 or 3 analysis topics, because that seems to be so popular with everybody. But we're also want to make sure we cover a lot of the other bases as well. So we're looking at these. I'm gonna let that continue on for a moment. I'm gonna slide to the next slide and then talk about what our next webinar is as you're finishing up with this. If you've finished, you can hit the submit button, and that box will pop out of your way. The next webinar is something that was feedback from this exact poll earlier on, and feedback in emails and other comments. And it was track maps. We did some work with track maps. We talked about the track maps in the AIM universe. We talked about how they all kind of tie together, whether or not they're just the start finish line coordinate track maps, or the SmartyCam graphic track map, or a couple weeks ago we did how to a little bit more information on building track maps inside of Ray Studio 2 Analysis. And then with a lot of feedback, we talked about, okay, we have a better idea of how to build them for what we want, but like to learn a little bit more about going further with track maps and digging in a little bit deeper. So next, this coming Thursday, June 11th, our friend Ray Phillips, who is an expert in the software and a great driver coach, and has been working with some things, does some kind of cool little webinars and seminars on the side as well, with training on this kind of thing. He has a business called Precision Driving Analytics, and Ray's going to join us, and he's going to talk about going further with track maps. So one of the features he likes is the track report, something we haven't talked about a ton, but I've gotten some questions on it. So there's a picture of what a track report might look like. Ray's going to go into maybe even a little bit different way of creating track maps, and then also take that into taking it further down the path. Okay, now that I've created that, what are some functions that I can use that really help with track maps? So looking forward to Ray giving us that session in just a couple of days on June 11th. So I'm going to end that polling, and then I'm going to share it just so everybody can get an idea of what that looks like, and how we continue to adjust. Data analysis, still the big winner, yeah. And then ECU protocols is up there, CAN expansion, and the configurations. We just talked a little bit about that. People still digging a little bit more information on that, so we'll continue with that. We study these numbers a lot more in depth afterwards as well. So, but I did want to share that with you so everybody can see where kind of where we're at. Okay, let's get rid of that guy, and with that, one last thing is contact information. Robinson just gave a lot of really good ideas and different ways of doing things. There's his contact information. There's his email address. You got mine as well. Looking forward to any questions that anybody may have. I appreciate it, Robinson. Thank you very much. You did a great job. Anything else you want to add as we are kind of closing up?
No, that's everything. I appreciate everyone who took the time to attend today and listen to me. I hope it did your time justice. As I saw in the poll, we want more Roger. We want more data analysis.
and our great co-hosts that we have joining us. It's always great to have such different perspectives coming at to hear one person tell you how to do something, or try to instruct you on how to do it is okay at some level, but it's always great to have such different perspectives, and we're so lucky that we have these folks like yourself and Ray coming up next week or later this week that are helping us out. So I appreciate everybody being out there. Looking forward to seeing you again in just a couple of days at the next one. Thanks for coming,
Thank
and
you all, everybody.
everybody have a great day.